When I was 12 years old, my mother and I were watching TV in her bedroom. It was one of those really stuffy summer evenings. Stating the obvious, I said aloud, "It is so hot in here." Immediately, the fan that was sitting on the dresser 5 feet away from us turned on its own. We sat there, in silence, as the fan oscillated back and forth, blowing cool air on us. Both of us couldn't believe it, and didn't know what to think. It's as if someone had heard me and turned it on, but we were the only two in the room, and couldn't have reached it. The switch on the fan was kind of sticky, and there's no way it could have happened by accident. When I think about it, it still bothers me. How creepy, how immediate it happened. Nothing like that has ever happened to me before or since, but I'll never forget that summer night and that fan turning on its own. A few years ago, my best friend and I moved into a rental house. It was definitely a weird house, and I got some strange vibes when I entered it. Every night when I went to sleep, I would hear music. Not singing, just music. Like someone had a distant radio on. Not any song I could ever name. Just faint music playing in the distance. I had dreams every night of a crowd of faceless people with a little boy standing in front. He never spoke, but I could tell he was trying to tell me something. The fridge would often open on its own, and our cats would hiss at the corners of the house, but nothing was there. We would smell cigarette smoke coming from the back room at 3 o'clock every day. My aunts were, and still are, big into ghost hunting, so they came and set up cameras in my house one night. We didn't catch much, but one of the cameras did do something strange. At 3 in the morning, the camera spun in a circle by itself for 15 seconds. The front porch light turned on its own, and it got really bright and then faded off. When I moved out of the house after 2 years, I had trouble sleeping because I didn't have music anymore. It was definitely a strange house. I was in the military, and I was stationed in Germany. My company headquarters was supposedly haunted. I just figured the guys, my NCOs, and even the first sergeant were just messing with me. But one night when I was on guard duty, it's about 2 a.m., and I start hearing voices and movement coming from upstairs, when nobody should be up there. I even smelled cigarette smoke. I go outside in the parking lot to make sure there's no cars there. It's completely empty, no cars in sight. And the thing is, even if you wanted to get upstairs, you would have to go right past me. So I go back inside and go upstairs. I look around, nobody's up there. No voices, no brooms left out. But the smell of cigarette smoke is still in the air. When my niece was real young, she was in a bouncer at my sister's house. I was their house and babysitting. I had left her to go to the kitchen to grab some water. My sister's dogs were probably sniffing and licking her head because I could hear her giggling like she was having a blast. I didn't notice how cold it had gotten. Then I heard it, a loud wooden snap, like a thick piece of wood had been snapped in half suddenly, or a tree was knocked over. I ran into the room, and what I saw and smelled freaked me out. The dogs were huddled in the corner whimpering. My niece was just staring at the ceiling corner with wide eyes, and it was cold, and smelled like cologne. I took her and we decided to go to a different room. When my sister finally came home, I told her what happened. She just rolled her eyes and said, "That is Hugh." I was confused. She said Hugh was the previous owner of the house who had died 10 years before his wife sold it. She said he likes to follow my niece around, and you can tell it's him because the dogs freak, it gets cold, and it smells like cheap cologne. I don't believe in any of that stuff, but I do believe that feeling you get in your gut when something doesn't feel right. I was surfing with a group of friends, and while paddling back out, we came across a dead body. He was completely swollen from being in the water, and I can still see his eyeless face from when we flipped him over. Wish we had never done that. I used to volunteer at a nursing home. One day when I was walking through a hallway that's normally uncomfortably warm, I got a sudden chill and goosebumps. I had trouble getting warm the rest of the day. I told one of the nurses about it, and she said, "You must have walked through a ghost." Strange things happened in that nursing home. Sometimes the lights would flicker, the TVs would turn on or off by themselves, and often we would have residents complain about people coming in and out of their rooms at night. When we asked them to describe what they looked like, they could describe them down to the detail of their nightgown or the color of glasses they were wearing. The other workers and I realized they were describing past residents who passed away in these same rooms. Several of the staff there were from Southeast Asia, and they were talking about ghost and disrespect of the dead so much that management had someone come do a candlelight ceremony. That job was so creepy and eerie. To this day I get chills when I think about it. I'll never forget one time checking in on a resident, and they looked at me and said, "Who is that? Are you training someone?" I turned around and saw no one there. Looking back at the resident, their eyes were looking over my shoulder, as if someone was standing behind me. It freaked me out. I don't ever want to go back to a place like that. A few years ago, my family and I lived in a house with a rather large basement. Down in the basement, there was another door that led to a smaller room, a room which my dad mainly kept his tools. When I was about 16, I went downstairs to the basement to get a textbook because I was working on a science project that night. It was about 2 a.m. I went down the stairs and turned on the light. When I was about halfway down the basement stairs, the doorknob on the smaller room started shaking violently. Whoever was trying to open the door couldn't because the door was locked. Suddenly, they banged on the door once, and then it stopped. I stood there, my heart pounding, my eyes wide, staring at the door, waiting to see if it would move again. In the back of my mind, I thought it could possibly be my dad or brother who got stuck in the room, but I didn't want to take any chances, so I went back upstairs and grabbed my dad's hunting rifle. My heart still racing, I made my way down to the basement again and slowly opened the door. When I looked in, nobody was in there. I was so confused, as this was impossible. The door that I just opened was the only way in and out of the small room. And even if they managed to get out, I would have seen them while I was upstairs getting the rifle. I told my parents about it the next morning, and they told me I was just hallucinating or that I dreamed it. But I know what I saw. Thankfully, we moved out a while back. It was by far the scariest moment of my life.